taking off my shoes, Mr. Deputy.
Get comfortable.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. I rise today to offer my contribution on behalf of the people of the Kalani constituency to the debate on the Anti-Gang Bill 2024. Sadly, the Bahamas has a long-standing and complex issue with crime. Our problem and failures on crime involve the dysfunction in criminal justice system, as well as social and cultural problems. Our challenge is to address these myriad problems simultaneously, and our annual murder count has nearly tripled over the past 20 years. For a small country that should have 20 or fewer murders annually, we consistently have more than 100. There were 128 murders during the first full year of the Davis administration in 2022. And this was the second highest total in our nation's history. Our murder rate is many times worse than countries and cities with much larger populations. For example, there were 103 homicides in Greater London last year. And London has a population of approximately 8.5 million. The Bahamas, with a population of 400,000 people, had 110 murders. The majority of them occurred in New Providence, that has a population of about 300,000. This is a staggering comparison. It is important to note that our crime problem is primarily situated in New Providence, where most of us live. Most of our family islands remain safe, though we have seen an uptick in murders in Abaco, our third most populous island. And during the last FNM administration, we had some success in reducing the murder count. In back-to-back years, in 2018 and 2019, we had 91 and 95 murders, respectively. That was still too many, but those years represented some progress in combating this problem. I do not blame the PLP for being the sole cause of the crime problem. Many complex institutions, socio-economic and cultural factors contribute to the crime problem here in our nation. However, this administration must bear responsibility for its lack of a comprehensive plan. It must also bear responsibility for the lack of full attention by often absent and seemingly indifferent Prime Minister, whose overwhelming and main my priority is travel. The Davis administration has failed to live up to its promises on the campaign trail, to bring forward policies to reduce the problem. The PLP promised, quote, enhancing crime-fighting methodologies in their manifesto, in their so-called aggressive war against crime. With half of their term finished, this has not happened. That promise is not likely to be lived up to, in part because the Prime Minister is not focused on the core issues affecting the country. issues such as crime, the health crisis, cost of living crisis, pothole and infrastructural crisis, and our immigration crisis. Instead, we had the second most murders ever in their first year. His failures in governance and failure to coordinate his cabinet are affecting a range of key policies. Mr. Deputy, for this bill to be effective, as with any other bill, you need effective enforcement. You need true leadership, a leader who is there to oversee things to happen. Mr. Deputy, the Prime Minister is too busy doing other matters and at the same time showing a lack of leadership, in fact, weak leadership. In fact, he continuously throws his members under the bus. And this would have started way back in 2014 when the then Prime Minister, Perry Christie, was thrown under the bus. The member for Fort Charlotte was thrown under the bus in 2022. It's headline in The Guardian. The writer for the Prime Minister's speech was thrown under the bus in November 2022 with the deficit. The financial secretary and staff were thrown under the bus. In fact, the Prime Minister said he did not see the report, yet decisions were made. Then he threw his deputy prime minister under the bus, as recorded in March 2022, Nassau Guardian. He threw the member for Angliston under the bus in March 2023, recorded in the Nassau Guardian. And all evidence are here, Mr. Deputy, to be tabled. And most recently, and this is the most important part, where leadership has not been demonstrated. Most recently, he threw the member for Fort Charlotte with respect to national insurance decision under the bus. The member for Fort Charlotte came to this Parliament and spoke about the changes in the 1.5% increase that would be implemented in national insurance 1st of July and every 2 years. Mr. Deputy, the Prime Minister's office came back the following day with a different story. Now, Mr. Deputy, I have been Prime Minister in this country. I know how it works. That was a cabinet decision. How it works, cabinet decisions are sent to every respective ministry so that the ministers and the relevant staff would read the cabinet decision. The permanent secretary of that particular ministry would take that component out and prepare within the minister's speech. So the minister's speech was the cabinet decision. Mr. Deputy, the policy under the Westminster system, if a cabinet minister goes against a cabinet decision, I, as Prime Minister, has a responsibility to release that cabinet minister. In this case, the Prime Minister ignored his entire cabinet after a decision was made. He changed it. He demonstrated no respect, no leadership capability for his entire cabinet. And I say to any one of them, stand here and say that was not a cabinet decision, so when the evidence comes forth, you would have misled Parliament, and subsequently, under the system, would be forced to resign. I would sit and allow any minister to say that was not a cabinet decision that Fort Charlotte spoke about in here. So each and every one of you, the Prime Minister has no respect for. You made the decision and he went against. I would sit if it's different. Mr. Deputy, as I've said, and I want the Bahamian people to listen to me carefully. As I've said, if a cabinet minister did that, as the prime minister, you have a responsibility to release that cabinet minister. What that means is because they were all ignored of a decision that they made, they have a responsibility to remove the prime minister. That's your responsibility. Mr. Deputy, this year, we had so many killings and so much violence that the United States put out a revised safety warning on us that captured worldwide headlines. The coverage harmed our reputation. Our crime problem is diminishing our quality of life. Our crime problem is threatening our tourism economy. Michael, I see you laughing, eh? The Prime Minister and his Minister of National Security are failing in the crime fight. The Prime Minister is rarely in the country to do his job. The Minister of National Security, good man, deserves a ministerial post, but is the wrong man for this post. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy, we have had 42 murders just 3.5 months into the year. We are on pace to have again one of the most violent years in our history. And Davis administration has brought the anti-gang bill to the House as part of its response to the out-of-control violence. This is not the first time a PLP administration has presented an anti-crime bill. In fact, the last Christie administration led the passage of anti-gang legislation in 2014. And the law came into effect in 2015. And while there were some charges under the law, it does not appear as if there were any convictions. The Nassau Guardian reported in its April 9th, 2024 article entitled, I quote, we hope courts will apply sentences in anti-gang bill," Prime Minister says, "that there were no convictions under the previous law." I support the proposed legislation. I support the legislation. Its stated purpose is to help maintain public safety and order by discouraging membership in gangs, suppressing and punishing participation of gang members in serious offenses and in gang-related activity. Too many young Bahamians have been killed over the past decade, and too many have been shot and sustained life-altering injuries, preventing them from fulfilling their full potential. The crime problem in New Providence regularly stresses our public health system. At times, the doctors and nurses are overburdened caring for the gunshot injuries, stabbings, and other blunt force injuries. The doctors and nurses work very, very hard, and they can compete on a level with any physician or nurse throughout the world. Citizens who need emergency care may have to wait because of all the violent crime victims coming in at a given time. Violent crime victims take up a lot of surgical space and time. They take up bed space on the wards being cared for. Mr. Deputy, patients come into the institution. Those victims of criminal activities may take priority. Utilize blood sources, utilize medications. Patients come to Princess Margaret Hospital. The admission fee is $10. Many of them cannot even afford the $10. But you know what happened, Mr. Deputy? They are seen by the top-notch doctors in this part of the hemisphere who can compete with any doctor throughout the world, and nursing personnel, medical personnel. But the doctor can only give them prescription because there are no medication. Now imagine, Mr. Deputy, if they could not afford $10 to see the doctor at the hospital, you give them prescription and tell them go to the pharmacy. What is that prescription? A death wish, that's all, because they cannot fill it. And therefore they go home, the disease entity deteriorates, or they present themselves a month or two later in a worse state because they've seen the doctor. Now the doctor wants to know why have your illness deteriorated, but they couldn't afford the $10 to see the doctor. You expect them to afford the medication? We're short of medication in the hospital. Prime Minister Ingram had such a problem when I was Minister of Health. The hospital was running short. He mobilized an additional $5+ million to ensure that medical facilities, medicine was available. That's all we ask. Do the same. Along with an increasing number of Bahamians fearful of leaving their homes once darkness falls, the level of violence is threatening our tourism economy. The Bahamas is a beautiful place. Beautiful place, like you, Marathon, a beautiful place. It is a shame that crime is making more of our people fearful of enjoying where we are blessed to live. Mr. Deputy, while I support the bill, which provides stiff penalties for gang membership and affiliation, I raise a question about how the government supports legislation after it is passed. We must be realistic and analyze all the real reasons why the previous anti-gang legislation did not do all we hoped it would do across multiple administrations. Do our police and prosecutors need more training on these types of investigations? I don't know. Do they need more officers and prosecutors dedicated to gang-related cases? I don't know. Once the law is enacted, do we as a parliament need to act faster to make amendments so that the law works better, helping the police and prosecutors do their work? It is important for the government and parliament to ensure this law is successful and that it is regularly used to take down these violent groups. The Bahamas will become even more violent if we let gang culture settle deeper into our communities. We should not tolerate a gangland culture. Mr. Deputy, I would have hoped that the government, while bringing the anti-gang bill, would have brought an amendment to the firearms bill, because they should go hand in hand. The firearm bill, Section 29, subsection 3, allows 14 to 18-year-olds, our children, to carry weapons, carry guns. Allow them to accept guns as gift, or carry it for individuals, carry it for adults, carry it for guardians. And Mr. Deputy, carrying these weapons, it does not specify that the adults for whom they are carrying it for should themselves have a gun license. And you know what they do, Mr. Deputy? I am told that these 14 to 18-year-olds, because they can carry weapons, they carry in their backpack to another gang's territory so that they can plant the gun and others come in and do whatever job they have to do, and then the kids can take it back out. And if they are caught, there's nothing in the law to prosecute them. We need amendment to deal with that. Again, I ask, you'll do it, I know. Again, I ask, how many criminals were given firearms? Mr. Deputy, I again call on the Prime Minister to focus on crime. His lack of focus is part of the reason why the PLP is performing so poorly on so many fronts. He likes to attend conferences abroad so much that he forgets a prime minister must engage with multiple serious issues at once here at home. He should not want to have the distinction of having the most murders happen in one term under his watch. Bahamians want this administration to succeed in the crime fight. Our people deserve and demand safer communities. We want our young people to turn away from the life of crime and gangs and to find productive work in the legal economy. This is why the last FNM administration invested in free preschools, free BTVI and University of Bahamas, and BTVI had 100% enrollment for the first time, a fourfold increase in certification. This is why we provided access to funding for young business people via the Small Business Development Center. This is why we created the Over the Hill initiative, which extended concessions to the inner city. And the PLP is off course in many areas. It is unclear why the Prime Minister has left the current Minister of National Security in his post. He has generally failed to address crime and violence. In fact, the situation keeps deteriorating under his watch. The PLP needs a serious crime plan. This should start with a new minister, as I have mentioned on many occasions. It may be, too, that the Prime Minister should bring together a new set of crime advisors from here and abroad to help him craft a viable strategy. It is clear that the Prime Minister has no ideas on his own. The whole country knows that. And, Mr. Deputy, anti-gang legislation is mostly intended as a cure. We also need greater crime prevention measures. We have still not found a comprehensive intervention strategy to redirect young people from gangs, crime, and violence. I wish to quote from a local commentary which notes, I quote, "Even as governments have rightly allocated more resources to the courts, the police, and related measures, still underfunded are broader scale social interventions which have been shown to reduce crime in the medium and long term." It further went on, the most successful social intervention programs involve intense efforts to redirect, mitigate, or change the habits and mindsets of those who may be disposed to or become involved with criminal conduct because of various circumstances. Many of those who are criminally minded will not be deterred except by good policing and or incarceration. But there are many others internationally whose lives are being transformed by initiatives not yet seriously tried in the Bahamas. And over the years, various youth programs have been discussed but never implemented. These include the Upward Bound program, which have proven highly successful in other countries. And Mr. Deputy, I also note some successes that Barbados has had. News Nation in Barbados reported, quote, in 2023, Barbados experienced a notable decrease in crime rates, particularly in homicides, which dropped from 43 in 2022 to 21 in subsequent year. This marked the lowest murder rate to the island's nation in the past decade, and Police Commissioner Richard Boyce underscored the significant reduction, highlighting that the murder rate per capita for 2023 stood at 7 per 100,000, a considerable improvement from the 15 per 100,000 recorded in 2022. Nation News also reported a pivotal turning point in crime reduction was attributed to a truce brokered between two prominent gangs in February 2023, and over 200 individuals from different blocks and communities facilitated by the government's intervention, gathered at Chapman Lane, the city, to pledge an end to the long-standing conflict. The Barbados News site further reported, following the truce, Lane's ministry under the Attorney General's office attempted to further address the crime situation through social interventions. In April, the National Peace Program was launched, focusing on helping all-risk youth get on track and steering them away from a life of crime and violence. And another highly touted social intervention program by the police commissioner was the Princess Trust International Team Program. This 12-week development initiative targeted at-risk youth, young persons between the ages of 16 and 25, teaching life skills and how to build resilience while introducing them to tools enabling responsible societal membership. Boyce said the success of the program had turned the lives around of many at-risk youth. Barbados has a population of approximately 280,000. We have a population of 400,000. It has brought its murder rate to the single digits in terms of per 100,000. Sadly, the Bahamas remains in the double digit. Mr. Deputy, I support this legislation, but I also once again passionately appeal to the government to review and implement a range of prevention and intervention measures. We need full-funded programs and initiatives that will address the very high levels of crime and murder that continue to assault us, and that is getting worse. A number of these initiatives will cost less than the large amount of contracts to consultants and the cost of the Prime Minister's constant and extravagant travel. If crime and violence are a priority for the Davis administration, we need to see this demonstrated in sustained youth and gang intervention programs. The Prime Minister and his government fail to make such investments. They are just talking past the problem, and crime will continue to increase. Mr. Deputy, I only want to inform the public that there are possibilities of road rage within our community. Just last week, Mr. Deputy, after finishing exercising from 5 a.m. to 6:10 a.m., I went to my usual place. I went to Starbucks and left Starbucks at 7:30 a.m. heading home, when a car that was overtaking me found itself caught in a situation where a head-on car coming in the opposite direction would have posed great danger to him. I was driving in my normal relaxed mode, heading home. That car that was overtaking me had to slow down to avoid himself hitting into another car. And as I turned, that car followed me. I assumed that it was somebody following me who just wanted to talk. I continued driving, and that car pulled up on the side of me, and to avoid hitting the car, I had to drive basically across somebody's driveway to avoid the car. As I re-entered the street again, the car continued to follow me and subsequently cut across me. I stopped, innocently screwed down my glass, and the individual with an American, that was stupid of me, the individual with a British accent, started to accost me and aggressively threw words at me, stating that I could have caused him to run into a vehicle, etc. And he aggressively continued. The only thing I said to the individual before taking off and realizing and recognizing that this was a case of road rage, the only thing I said is, you should be happy that I'm traveling by myself this morning, because if my aides or my security was with me, this conversation would never have happened. It was reported to the police, and the matter is now presently under investigation. And there are lots of cameras in the area that I was, so I'm certain that the police will find this Caucasian British individual who had approached me in such an aggressive manner. But I said that to say that as politicians, we take life lightly and not serious, because we automatically assume that people are following us because they are probably your constituent, friend, or whatever, and they want to talk. We stop. We expose ourselves by screwing down our glass. But I was lucky. It could have been an individual who could have taken a shot at me. So I'm only saying it to inform the Bahamian public that road rage exists. And they must be very, very careful. As politicians, you too must be careful. Mr. Deputy, I support this legislation.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many